Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now, we've loads to talk about. Brian O'Driscoll in the studio. Great to have you in. You're very welcome.
Thanks, Joe.
You were at Twickenham on Saturday. Everybody there says that it was an extraordinary atmosphere, an extraordinary sense of occasion.
Yeah, certainly it felt that. We were in the studio, so you've got to get through a pane of glass to appreciate it. But it was loud, and you could hear I was sitting between Clive Woodward and Johnny Wilkson, and Clive made reference to it was as loud as he's remembered from the good old days.
With a tear rolling down his eye.
Yes, it's sick that he had to share one of his favourite atmospheres. But no, it did feel raucous. It did feel loud, and that, you know, with all of the penalties that were coming England's way and the way they were winding the crowd up and celebrating every penalty like it was a score in itself or a match win in itself, just heightens the crowd's enthusiasm for getting behind them. So, for everyone that was annoyed at, and listen, don't get me wrong, I watched it again today and I was annoyed at all of the celebrations of it, but people are very short married as well. Think about Tyke Furlong's big pump of the fist last year, and in the similar fixture, so back in the Aviva. So it happened. It comes in roundabouts, and you have to do what you got to do to really get the momentum swinging in your favour, particularly if you're a man down.
Yeah, they're not totally empty gestures. You ride that momentum. You're emotional. Ireland have had many a performance based on that. Forwards
and scrum play is all about one-upmanship, and about getting the mental edge after the physical edge and reinforcing it. And that's why you see so many of them feel so pumped after a big scrum penalty, because it's bigger than just that moment.
Yeah.
It's a psychological battle that front rowers and front five need against their opposite man that really fuels the rest of their performance as well, and it can act as a real catalyst because it's significant. Penalty is a shot at goal, or it's 40-50 metres down the park in a relieving pressure or setting up a great line out opportunity. So it's significant beside just that very split moment itself.
On the scrum, we had Fiona Hayes on yesterday. She broke it down brilliantly for us about what was going wrong and what was illegal. What's your scrum knowledge? Would you have looked at that, say, across those 80 minutes in real time and thought to yourself, there's something odd here?
Yeah, I think you've got to look at some of the experience of the players, the reputations, and how frustrated some were. In particular, Tyke Furlong, he was at pains to tell the referee that he just couldn't understand his decisions, and obviously he felt there was huge illegality going in. I have to say, in real time, it was very hard to call it. I thought, having watched it back, I thought Sinclair was pretty square, and if anything, once or twice I thought Cian Healy was under pressure and ended up caving in a bit. On the other side, I don't know, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I have to leave it to, that's not my area of expertise. Genge will tell you one thing and Furlong will tell you another. So
yeah.
I'll leave it to Fiona Hayes and everyone else. But looking at it, I think what you're always looking for, if something does, if a scrum does turn, it's who is the squarest team while that's happening. And I think a couple of times, certainly the early penalties that England got, they felt as though they were the squarest team, and that they weren't breaking up. They weren't as a unit, as a five-man unit in particular.
Yeah.
And if you look at the spacings of the second row as well, where they were, kind of those gaps between them, that they're under huge pressure then.
Yes. Do me a favour and move your microphone the other side of that notebook of yours, and we'll get those dulcet tones.
Sorry about that. Okay.
If you're captain in that scenario, i.e. Johnny Sexton, and you're also looking at the scrum and you're not too sure what the hell is going on, but you need to try and reason with the referee in some way, there's not much you can do really, or because they did seem to have a few consultations with the referee. It didn't make much difference. And then somebody like Nigel Owens is writing on the Sunday saying, well, that's a streak of 6 consecutive penalties to England at the scrum could have been 4-2 if not 3-3, so something was really going awry. It seemed it was very difficult on the field for Furlong or for Sexton to try and communicate with Raynal.
Yeah, and listen, that's where your diplomacy really comes to the fore about trying to get decisions in other areas. If he goes in with a mindset or feels as though his decision making is swayed by an action he's seen, you've got to go and try and change or pivot or just modify something, and all you can do then is bring to his attention what you feel the issue is, and once he knows about it, he's going to look out for it the next time. And unfortunately, that only sometimes happens after you can commit 2 or 3 penalties that with the same infringement in inverted commas. So it's a difficult thing to manage as a captain. It is, or as a pack leader, because sometimes some referees, they're not for changing, and you just have to. You've got to tough it out, and you've got to find a way to stay in that fight. You've got to think about getting your technique spot on, and just all you can do is bring it to his attention. And if he's not going to bite on it, what can you do?
It led to such an absorbing game, because on the one hand, a scrum that dominant, that team is going to win, and yet on the other hand, they're down to 14 men. They're also at home, which is a big advantage, but then Ireland's attack is much better. So you've got all of these different weights and counterweights, and it kept us guessing a touch. Generally, I presume, you've been in that instance where Ireland's scrum at Twickenham went to pot per Tom Court, thrown to the wolves almost.
I was thankfully watching from a bar in New York at the time, I was rather relieved.
But there's not much you can do generally.
There really isn't, and particularly when it's your sub, has come on because you've got an injury and there's nothing. You can't look to the bench. You look to the bench and it's empty. And it's very frustrating, because then with every there's a tentativeness. It happened to us in the Heineken Cup in 2012 against Northampton, that first half, getting destroyed in the scrum, and it makes you a bit more anxious on the ball. You knock the ball on, oh no, the nervousness around ball handling because your scrum is sprinting backwards, and then all of a sudden do you realise the knock-on effect to each error is momentum to the opposition. And just shows in the second half of that game we turned it around and we got the better of them in the scrum, and that was the turning point. So it's still such a huge aspect of the game, and like it or loathe it, it's great that it can be determined by something that is very specific to a group of individuals. Back to here I am talking about, I have 15 years experience of playing in the game, 8 as an analyst, and I think I know some things in the scrum, but I just couldn't properly pull apart what the nuances or what the difference was that Ellis Genge was specifically doing on Furlong. Was he boring in? Were they both trying to target the tight end? Is that not the norm? It's not a skill set that I've had to really get into. As an analyst, I want to know a little bit more, but it feels as though you could look at the same scrum a few times and you could get a couple of different outcomes, and that's to do with referee interpretation as well.
Something you would have a good feel for is Ireland's approach against 14 men in possession. So there were 17 turnovers, which is high, and at times, and there are various examples of Ireland forcing the pass and throwing an offload when, after a 20-metre break inside opposition 22, just hit the deck, and this will be a numbers game and Ireland will score a try. So there were definitely accusations of, certainly sloppiness, but also poor decision making. And I've heard the counter argument is, if we're going to really embrace this style of play, and if we're going to really encourage offloads, then at times we are going to see Ireland force it. And we can't get too pent up about that, because in the end, they still wear a team down. They still get 4 tries.
Yeah, I think there are two interesting arguments. I think, first of all, let's go second one first. I agree. I think we want to play that game, and we want to be an offloading team, and we want to, from a public point of view, we want to be entertained. But they've more chance against the best teams in the world if they play this style, change the point of contact. That's the reality of it. Not get into an arm wrestle. That said, I thought the timing of some of their offloads was wrong, and you offload pre or post contact. They were offloading a few times in the middle of contact, and there was a really good example of Furlong. I wrote a few of them down. There was one from Lowe, there was one from Byrne, one from Furlong, all in close to try scoring opportunities, 5 or 6 metres out. Furlong's one, he got whacked, big shot, but he, when he felt the impact of it, he was bracing himself for the offload. He just had to tuck that. Another phase. If you get hit in a big way, a man like him, not expecting it, going to properly knock him off his stride, even though he's a great ball handler, just took it and plays for the next for the next phase. Byrne likewise, Marchant did a great job on him and just managed to scrag his hand, tried to get an offload to Henderson. Just one more phase, and it felt like there was lots of times we were talking about one more phase. The first half, I thought they kicked the ball away a couple of times when they needn't do it. you know, for the Conan try, I think it was the only time in the whole game that they got above 10 phases.
Yeah,
Like
that's
unheard of.
1 minute 54 seconds, that passage.
That's unheard of for this Irish team, you know, to only, like, against 14 men, think about it. What do you want to do? You want to tire them, you want to hold them, you want to, you know, make them, you know, scrummage first of all, and then bring those front rowers through another a dozen or so phases, and you're going to find a mismatch. You're going to get Hugo Keenan or Gary Ringrose on one of the bigger units who are going to be fatigued and not going to be, you know, as clear and concise as they would have been in other parts of the game. So
why do you think they did it? Why do you think they did it?
I don't know. Like, there was, you know, once Conway kicked it away, another time Sexton, and they made a break up that right side with that great Keenan offload. Conway told them to chip and chase, but like there's 3 or 4 of them in support. Like, hold on to it, just bring them through the phases. And another day the bounce of the ball maybe sits up for Conway and he might score a try, but we're, you know, all we can call is what we saw. And it just, you thought, hold on to it. They were so good with ball in hand. That's the other thing. Why kick it away? Why give the opposition a chance to get the ball back? Just take ownership of it, be miserly with possession, and force them into making those 50-50 calls, whether you don't know it's front door, back door. And Ireland's shape looked great. It did at times. Just felt the last bit of cutting edge was missing, and it was at times offload quality, poor pass quality once or twice. Even on that pivot, you know, Tadburn threw a couple of passes down on the ground behind that they recovered well and didn't lose possession. But small things like that goes to hand, and you create one more chance out wide. And the more times you create, the more chance you have of breaking any team.
So did you come away then kind of, because some people did come away frustrated, even though we're talking record-winning margin at Twickenham, and I suspect it's that area that in particular frustrated them, and a few sloppy penalties, I'm sure, as well. Did you come away saying, oh, come on, we got to be much better and sharper there, or do you see it as, look, it's positive, they're having a real cut in Twickenham? At
the time, frustrated. Yeah. I'm glad the game and the shape that they tried what they did try, and just inaccurate. And I think it's easy to fix that inaccuracy. That's the thing. You know, I look at that, you know, countering some of England's shape. They do something similar, but their lines of running just not where we are, which is... you know, which would be frustrating from their perspective. But watching the game today, Jamie George once or twice ran pretty pathetic lines. You're not going to stick any defender, whereas he runs hard. At one occasion, Doris has to bite in. Marcus Smith is around the corner. He made a break against Wales, got an offload. They're 20 metres up the pitch. As a result of George's line, Doris sees it, sure, he's not getting it, bounces out, pushes every defender out, and they're able to use the touchline as an additional defender. They're the margins. One person not doing their job has this massive knock-on effect to them not getting the line break that they should have done if everyone does what they're expected to do. So from an Irish perspective, it did feel as though, didn't get everything perfect, but it did feel as though we continued to go in the right way in what we're trying to achieve, of making people, forcing them into making decisions in fractions of a second.
Yes, and it's good that Ireland are having the bravery to do that at Twickenham and not just at home against Wales, you know.
And it's challenging against 14 men. It is. There's a galvanising effect. You know, that's a home crowd. Our penalty count was frustrating. That
15 penalties.
Besides the scrum penalties, there was a couple of really, really silly ones, and I don't have to go naming names, but there was one before, the one we scored the try, and then the one we gave them just before half time, slapped, you know, an arm in a ruck, to give them, to make it 15-9 versus 15-6. Like, that's significant. You know, go in 15-6. We've just taken the momentum, and now we've just given them something back. So, like,
well, even after when Doris went over for that try, which was ultimately disallowed, I think it crossed everyone's mind, we're going to win 100-0.
I thought it was going to be 25-0 or 25-point differential at that stage. I was like, this could be a rout.
Yes, and so that probably built big expectations, which then, when they weren't met, added to the frustration. But just looking at the game back again today, it was suddenly on about 25 minutes when England win their first scrum after Ireland had won the first one. Then Ian Henderson 2-3 minutes later gives away a very needless penalty, and Ireland get away with it. And then Johnny Sexton gets ahead of the kicker, gives away a penalty. Donald Lennon is saying, oh, that is criminal. And suddenly it's 8 points to 6 from thinking we were 15-0 and going to kick on. And around that half hour, 35-minute period, the atmosphere changed, and there was a sense, oh, England have something to get hold of here.
Like, how many tries have England scored in the Six Nations?
2.
How many teams have they cut open? How many try-scoring opportunities have they created? So few. What did they do against Wales? Just kicked their goals, took advantage of penalties. And penalties do come from squeezing the opposition and forcing them into making bad decisions. But God, they'll be very frustrated by some of the penalties they gave up.
Yeah.
Like, that's just access into the game where, you know, particularly if you're in possession or you're in total control. And by the way, this Irish defence has conceded 3 tries in the Six Nations. One of them was an intercept. And 2 against a very, very potent French attack.
Yeah, one of them forward, so we're now down to 1.
There you go, right? So, like, our defence is to be backed. And that's why those silly errors, those holding a guy's hand in a ruck, when there's no major pressure, I don't mind doing that when you're definitely going to score. They're definitely going to score a try and you feel you might get away without giving away a yellow card. There's good penalties to give away. Sure. But there was some really, really silly ones that would be very frustrating. And it gave England a leg up, leg up that they needed.
On England, Eddie Jones said afterwards, we want to be an old-fashioned England pack and a new-fashioned England attack. And the first part I could see.
Yeah.
On their attack, I mentioned these stats last night, so apologies for repetition, but just to get your thoughts on where they are. Metres carried, Ireland 555 to England's 214. Ireland had 192 passes. Ireland's passes is off the charts the last couple of months. England had 69 passes. Ireland had 143 runs. England had 59. And then just defenders beaten. Ireland 26, England 7, and 8 clean breaks to 1.
What were the offloads?
England weren't so bad on offloads, actually. I don't have them to hand. You asked me the one statistic I don't have, but they weren't horrific. But this new-fashioned England attack looks about as reductive and simplistic as it gets. I mean, I did say last night, if Eddie Jones didn't have this great body of work behind him at World Cups, there'd be major doubts now over where they're going or what they're working towards.
Well, he bought himself some time, didn't he, this week by talking about how everybody does catch up in the 3 months before a Rugby World Cup. And I agree with him, they do. You've got the pre-season together, so you will have time to kind of bed in principles and kind of add to the foundations. And there should be more than foundations under him, but you know, the building blocks of what you're trying to where you're trying to get to. It is, because you don't have much time together. So it does feel like he was buying himself time, but I would be pretty unimpressed with the English attack over the course, not just in that game, but over the course of the Six Nations.
Yeah.
Take Marcus Smith out of that. I know you're talking about, if you take any one star player, but like the couple of tries he scored, the line breaks he's had, it felt as though he's had to create a lot on his own rather than the shape itself creating it.
By the way, on you know, there's just where we have gone with rugby, say, it feels in particular the last maybe decade, whereby Eddie Jones is coming off 5th place in the Six Nations last year. He's now openly talking to the English rugby public this year about how, I'm just trying a few things out and it's all about the World Cup. Like, and even Ireland games, and we're as guilty of it in this studio as anyone. We have this amazing game at Twickenham, you know, life to be lived, enjoy the moment, a thrilling game, and almost the first thing we say is, well, what does this mean about the World Cup? Like, we're in danger of distilling 4 years down to just World Cup.
Are we not now an obsessed nation around Rugby World Cup?
But I don't like Jones almost
that's not just
giving away.
You, but that's not just you.
No, it's not just me. It's actually, I'm including Eddie Jones. Like, Eddie Jones kind of turning around to the English public and saying, after our 5th place last year in the Six Nations, and this is an experimental Six Nations, like, we've got to be careful here, or we're going to reduce the Six Nations to, like, you know, the FA Cup disappears, and it's a different parallel. But, you know, we need to keep the importance of these tournaments. Otherwise, there's no point watching rugby except for a month every 4 years. Because nothing else seems to matter the way we're going on. Yeah,
they're just words, though, aren't they?
Well, I hope so. But then I look at England, because I don't like Jones'
we all
approach.
know that. Yeah, we all know that the Six Nations is still, you know, the pinnacle global tournament outside Rugby World Cup. Like, that's why we got the World Cup winners trying to get into it, right? They're trying to bail from arguably, well, the best team in the world, comes into the best team in the world more often than not. Yeah. One of the best teams, 2 double World Cup winner, and so I don't worry about where the Six Nations is going to be, because
I just feel it's in World Cup warm-up territory very soon if we keep going along this route.
Like, they're just words, you know. I feel as though it's what we as supporters and fans and pundits and analysts make of it, rather than necessarily just one coach. And listen, it's a foreign coach coming in, and maybe he doesn't see it like we've always treated it. He hasn't grown up with it. So maybe he doesn't feel the need to have the same respect for the yearly event that is Six Nations, that he sees it as climbing blocks to get to this World Cup. And that's may very well be what he sees it as. But I'd be pretty confident that he's not going to be there in 2024 and thereafter. So, like, I think we have to take an awful lot of what we hear from Eddie Jones with a pinch of salt when he says good things about us, or when he says bad things about us, or when he says anything about our prized possession, the prize cow. Like, let's not stress ourselves too much. We know what it is. We know it's great. We've got a weekend coming next weekend where 2 of the 3 games are going to be significant, where you're going to have hopefully one team in the lead, and then another team trying to take that lead.
Yeah. The 50-22 is quickly becoming everybody's favourite rugby law. I was about to say rule there. Law. It's worked aplomb, hasn't it?
Well, if you look at it as well, if you look at the first try, the James Lowe try, Marcus Smith is in the backfield and he's covering the touchline back there, and he's he's almost in the 5 metre channel. Because now that's where you have to be. And we see so many more kicks down the middle now, because that's where the space is. Everyone's marshalling the 15s. So naturally, if you want to kick the ball, you want to hit grass, that's the only spot that you're going to actually land it. But as a result of that 50-22, there's such knock-on effects to the positional sense of where those guys are. And he's worried about giving that away. And where Ireland strike from is I think it's just inside their own half. And then they unlocked them. And if you're critical, he could have closed the gate maybe a little bit early, but just seemed a little bit too easy for Ireland. But there's small little aspects to that 50-20 that impact the positional sense in tries as well as just kicks, where I've got to cover this. So it leaves space in the front line, and that's where clever teams go after it.
Yes.
As Ireland did.
Yes.
And as well, it was really interesting, the first, like Harry Randall had just taken the quick tap to try and speed the game up about a minute before our try, maybe 90 seconds before our try. It was quite a long sequence. He ended up at guard, and when the ball was thrown outside, he was exhausted, having taken the quick tap and gotten back into defensive mode. So I was talking in the studio, and Johnny Wilkes was like, no, not quick taps. He's like, slow it down. We're looking for an arm wrestle here today. We do not want high tempo. These lads need a break. They don't need to, to work their engines in the first, 10, 15 minutes of the game when they've got 70 more to go with one man less.
Is Caelan Doris such a better performer at 8 that has to be the starting point in the back row now?
He's just such a good footballer. I think he's fine in both, to be honest with you. I really do.
Doesn't have to. It's not.
I think he's going to get. The thing is, will he get? Where will he get his hands on the ball more often?
8.
Yeah. So probably then, yes.
Okay.
Because you want someone of his ability to be able to ball play as much as he can. It remains the fact that him and Tig are the two best ball players in our pack, and they run the same. They show the same shape. They run the same intensity, no matter what they're doing. And they're that. They've got that much football that they're comfortable in the same position, showing the same picture to the defence. And so then it's up to you to decide what they're going to go and do with it. And when you can carry as well as both of them, or you can tip in and out, or you can pull it out the back, very, very difficult player to defend again. So it's tough on Jack Conan, because he did nothing wrong. Last year played very well, particularly in that England game. Didn't do anything wrong in the Lions tour. Played all 3 tests. But if you're looking at pure football, you got a different beast in Doris.
Right.
And he's still young, and he's still, maybe you'd love to say, you'd love to feel as though he's another couple of kilos to put on, maybe, to be able to deal with those really big physical back row packs. A few people said maybe he was out-muscled a little bit against Aldrit and Jelange in that French back row. He was still very evident in that game, but he's very, very exciting to watch because he just, I think he sees and reads the game extremely well, and then he's got that physical attribute to go with it.
And who jumps out to you as the sixth then?
I don't know. You see, that's the thing. It is then sometimes about getting your best players in the park or the best ball carriers. And Peter O'Mahony comes in and does a fantastic job off the bench nearly the whole time now. So it feels, do you get more from him over 20 or 25 minutes than maybe you do over the course of 80? But then sometimes he has one of those monster performances that we've seen in big games more often than not. So, so I don't know. I don't know who's, you know, it's Van der Fleer, Doris, and then Doris at 6 and Conan at 8, or Peter O'Mahony for now. But I don't see that changing unless, you know, Coombs comes through at 8 and shows something more than he has so far, and Doris does go to, because I think Coombs has good hands too. I think he's a bowler. He can play and sees it really well. Good offload game, again, good intellect. So if he just steps it up that next level, that gives the coaching ticket the confidence, maybe he could play 6 or Doris play 6, or they swap. I don't know, but at the moment I think it is the guys that were in that 23.
Okay, I think everybody's heart sunk for James Ryan. It's an awful thing, and he's off the back of a tricky year on the concussion front, and we wish him well. No one's even debating whether or not it's a red card. It's so obviously a red card. These high hits, it seems a red card is not enough of a deterrent. It's hard to get a read on why a 2 to 3 year, 4 year campaign now on World Rugby's part, with red cards being dished out at a frequency we've never seen before, why that's not bringing height tackles down almost overnight. And would you be surprised this weekend if there's another red card for a high tackle?
No, you wouldn't. It's. I think we are frustrated by it. I think we are. And Charlie Ewels, as soon as he saw the replay, knows that it was a red card. He's not denying the fact that it was. Yeah. You know, the referee had no decision whatsoever. I didn't see it in real time, but as soon as you saw the first replay, head on head, it's the tackle that World Rugby are trying to get. If you don't have any hinge at the hips, you don't have any mitigation. Therefore, you're always high, dangerous, with force. It's a red card. They're trying to get red card down. If you don't give them an in with any of those factors, you're going to be sent off. And be it after 42 seconds or 42 seconds into injury time, it's going to be the same colour. So it's it's frustrating for England, and it's frustrating for World Rugby. But I think we just have to stick with it. And I don't know what the alternative. You would just eventually, coaches will have, and we're still gonna. I think we're still gonna have red cards. They're not going to go away. But the other side of things is we're bringing heights down significantly elsewhere as well. Yeah. We have to remember those sort of shots were play on. It was a rugby incident a few years ago. So let's not forget we've taken away lots of situations where before players would have gone high. Yes. And now their technique is good, but we're not analysing it. That was great technique. That's true. We're just taking it as a given. Ellis Genge, as well in studio we talked about the big hit being gone. Right, it's gone from the game, and literally I'd say within 3 seconds Ellis Genge emptied Josh Van der Fleer as we were talking in studio about it. So the big hits there was just all about technique. You know the way you said there was a time when very recently that would have been just a rugby moment. Yeah. Do you think, say in a Charlie Ewels situation, without making it all about him, but do you think players are trying to tackle much lower, and yet they've had almost 10, 15 years of doing it a certain way, and almost they make the high tackle and they think, damn, just my subconscious took over and I did what was in my habit? Or do you think away in team meetings defensive coaches are still saying, I want you to tackle high and stop the ball? Listen, because defensive coaches have to have an appreciation that you're going to have a much better chance of doing the job if you've 15 men on the park. So it just comes out. A really silly defensive coach is saying that I still want big shots. I think it's about defending as units now, still getting double hits in, but it's, and if you get caught for an unlucky one, no defensive coach can have a problem. But very hard for any defensive coach to go, to Charlie, well, you did your best. like that's not good enough anymore, unfortunately. And the way the game has gone, we all know, we're watching at home and we can see it's a red card, and he knows it's a red card. There's going to be very few complaints from people. I think the people, I was at the game and I was doing a corporate thing afterwards, and people were giving out about it because they saw it once and maybe on the replay once. But if you have been watching the game for the last number of years, it's a non-decision.
Are you saying the people in the corporate suite only watch the 1 or 2 games a year?
Can you believe it?
Triple Crown. Here's the stat that jumped out at me. Ireland haven't won a Triple Crown at home in 18 years. At home in 18 years.
2010 was the sickener, wasn't it, in Croker?
Scotland, yeah. So I had a look back to 2004. The Lap of Honour, the blonde locks, Eddie O'Sullivan. But it was amazing. So there's a documentary on it. You know, 'cause it was such a big deal at the time. So I was watching it on YouTube. And like, it's all the players talking about it, and Eddie O'Sullivan saying, like, it hasn't sunk in yet. We've won a Triple Crown, it hasn't sunk in. And the one that you're all so happy, like doing this Lap of Honour. Like, O'Gara's there, he looks about 11, and he's like, I've been in City West for the last 7 weeks. It's amazing to see what this means to people. This is the greatest day in my rugby career.
Like 85, is that
Would be, yeah.
Yeah. So
Kieran Fitzgerald and the crew.
You have to understand that, and it's very hard to move on from 2004 to now.
I'm not saying there's anything to be ashamed of here.
No,
like, I know it was a moment in time. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to defend it.
I'm not. But it was a big deal, and it obviously was a catalyst for other things as well. It's not just that. It wasn't just a shot in the dark. Obviously, at the time, it was big. You know, we'd picked off South Africa in a win, an Australian win, and they were big deals. You hadn't beaten Australia since '79.
Big steps, yeah.
So there were momentous occasions to being able to ultimately go and achieve the Grand Slam in '09, and then subsequently what we've done in the last decade, and victories against the All Blacks, another Grand Slam, other championships, European glory for clubs. Like, it's significant where this country has come
for
since
sure.
then.
And like, it was lovely seeing all the players, chatting to the media freely, like on the Lap of Honour, and just excited. Gervin Dempsey was like just high on life. What do you think it means to the 2022 class, a Triple Crown?
It's not insignificant. Obviously, they're all about championship because they know what sort of team they are. What the way things have unfolded in the last year in particular, I think it's given them a different perspective on what their expectations should be. They've also got a very, very driven captain that is setting standards, and that wouldn't think that Triple Crown is... It's still nice to win silverware, but it's a means to the ultimate end of winning a championship, So
I wouldn't pop champagne until I'd seen Johnny pop it first in the dressing room.
No, I can't imagine that there will be any DVD about this.
No, it was good. What chance of England, after this very emotional performance, and they'll be fatigued, going to Paris at 8 o'clock on Saturday night and pulling off a shock?
Like, they've a chance. But, unsurprisingly, France's banana skin was always going to be Wales, wasn't it? Because it's that second last one. I think it's to get yourself up for the last one. England at home, if you're picking from a relatively full deck, it's very hard to see, with how England have struggled in attack, to see them really to outscoring France. The only thing that could possibly hurt France is ill discipline, and it feels like they've gone a long way towards sorting that. They're very, very well organised defensively. So there's always a chance, but you'd have to think that, I always look now to understand, to try and see what the likelihood is, and the spread is usually a good one. You'd have to think that France will be certainly 8 or 9 point favourites.
Okay. By the way, offloads, Ireland 11, England 4.
Well, that's significant. And we hadn't, I think we'd been averaging 6, had we 6 or 7 in the other games?
Yeah. Sorry, other games this championship. Yeah, I still have last year's championship in mind, where at times it was like 1 a game.
No, I know that we're moving on from that, but in this championship, so another 4 or 5 on top of against, a wound up English team is still, a lot to be taken out of it. And I thought some of the passing was really, really good as well. Quick mention for Gary Ringrose. and some of his quality of passing, I just thought outstanding.
Right.
Ability to catch and pass under massive pressure. So, yeah, that's in my notes, so I wanted to get that across.
Very good. Our rugby coverage and off the ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Brian O'Driscoll, thank you very much.
Cheers, Joe.
Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.